Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Astro Yoga chat. My name is Kate, and the beautiful Natalie is here with me. I am situated right now in Brooklyn, in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and Natalie is in Vienna, in Austria.
Hi,
Um,
everybody.
and we're so excited because this is our very first episode, and Natalie and I have known each other for many years. We just figured out that we've known each other now for 7 years. And we met each other because Natalie was in New York and she took one of my teacher trainings. And here's going to come in now, like the yoga part of where this connection built from. And then through the years, as Natalie and I got to know each other, you came to two of my trainings, right? You came to New
I
York.
did in training part 1 and 2. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And then from there, Natalie, brought me over to Vienna because she connected me to a yoga studio in Vienna. And so I've been going to Vienna now and teaching over there. And Natalie and I have kept our friendship very strong. It's been a very solid friendship throughout the years. And a lot of it, honestly, has to do with our love for astrology.
Yeah.
So this is where the connection is coming in with yoga and astrology. So we decided that since we have these chats with one another, and we thought, how great would it be if we can bring this energy to you and to talk about yoga and astrology and how it fits together and how everything is the way that we see it, the way that we feel it spiritually, things are connected. And hopefully to build this spiritual community where we can chat about the things that we love. And if you love yoga and if you love astrology, welcome. Welcome to our very first episode, our Astro Yoga chat.
And I want to say, pay attention. We're both wearing red. So red is actually the color of Mars. And Kate and I share the same Mars in Leo. So we also have a special connection, Mars and Saturn. So black and red, these are our colors. Yes. And actually, I mean, we do have a lot of things in common. We're just born like 2 weeks apart. And I think that's also why we connect so much. But yes, definitely our love for spirituality, yoga, and astrology. Yes.
And it's so funny because we didn't talk to each other and say, hey, let's wear red for this. As I'm getting ready, I like knew exactly where this shirt was. I was like, I'm wearing red because right now I'm feeling all of that energy from Mars. I'm feeling all of this like fire. And I'm going to use the word anger because it is a little bit of anger. It's like where it's like passion. And then as we turned on our cameras, like, boom, there we are. We're both wearing red. It's like, cool. This is great.
All sisters, yes.
So Natalie is our expert, and she's going to say that she's not, but trust me, she is. She is our expert here when it comes to astrology. I'm as they call it in like the surfing world, like when you're a beginner, you're a kook, right? So I'm a kook astrologer for sure. I have a huge passion for it. I did do a training in Vedic astrology, but it was only like level 1. It was about for 6 months. And Vedic astrology, which we'll talk about the difference between Vedic and Western, but the Vedic astrology was so over my head. I was like drowning in the ocean of knowledge that when I asked Natalie, where should I just couldn't grasp it. Where should I go? She pointed me into the direction of more Western astrology. And that's where I'm at now. But, and I know Natalie's not going to say it, so I'm going to say it for her. Natalie is 100% certified Vedic and Western astrologer. So a lot of the I would say the lessons that will come from astrology will come from Natalie.
Yes, thanks so much. And so should we start with the first few questions? Like
Yes.
some of your students from the yoga classes asked us something about astrology and yoga.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. So I don't know if you have it up or if I should read a question. It's up
Yes,
to you.
please read it up.
Okay. So the very first question that we got from Soul and Steady's yoga community was, do you think astrology should be used more practically or more spiritually? Which do you use it for?
Okay. So, well, going back, the roots, especially in Vedic astrology, is that Jyotish, what they call it, is part of the Vedas, so part of the spiritual Hindi books, and it is called the science of light. It talks about helping us to see and understand more. So actually, the basics are spiritual, and they use it for practical life. So how do you navigate? Like they connect it, of course, to reincarnation and the topics of karma, but how should a person with those planets and those qualities navigate? Whom should they marry? When are good times to start a new job? What jobs are good for you? So actually it leads from the spirituality into the practical things. And if it's now Vedic astrology or Western astrology, it's always used to be practical, right? So it has a spiritual background, it does. But then how do we use it to be more aware, to have a consciousness of what's going on? And when people ask me, like, really, do you believe in astrology? It's not about believing, like, you have to dive into the subject to know something about it. And of course, if the moon is moving the ocean, for ebb and flow, how can a planet that has so much more mass than the moon not have an effect on us and on the earth? So, I mean, once people realize, we go back in time and I can say, like, 2 years ago, this happened to you, and in the next 6 months, this won't happen, and it comes true, people understand, like, there is really something to it, So
Yeah.
it's spiritual and it's practical.
Absolutely. And the spiritual part as well, when it comes to like the planets, is when you look at what the different planets represent and their personalities and their energies. And then you look at also what cultures, many, many thousands and thousands of years ago, they've also had this attention to these planets and like have like built up their personalities per se, right? So like, I'm wearing red because of Mars and because of what's happening inside, but like Mars has a personality. So it's not necessarily that like, Mars is something where if it's somewhere in the charts, it's somewhere in the it's affecting what's happening with Earth. And if I feel that, it's like, it's practical in a sense where I get to understand, oh, okay, I'm feeling this. And this is where it's positioned, and this is what's happening. Is this making me feel this way? Or is it the fact that I'm now aware of I'm feeling this way, and this planet is also in this position? So it could be that energy could be coming up for all of us.
So in Vedic, they call the planets the grahas, like to grasp. So they take hold of you, and it's always, of course, connected. Like, a chart is always like a picture of your birth, and then the planets are constantly moving. So if they're moving in a good angle, there are chances opening up. If they're moving in difficult angles, it's getting a little bit more difficult. So it always depends how they're moving. But yes, they have qualities. And of course, cultures like with Vedic, they don't even know if it was 5,000 years before Christ or 10,000 years before Christ that it started. And other cultures like Babylonian astrology or Egyptian, they were all watching nature. They were just all looking up to the stars, and they realized there's a connection between how the planets are moving, and when there are eclipses, like when you cannot see the sun all of a sudden anymore, or the moon. So it's just now that, within the last few, probably only hundreds of years, that we became so much more into science, although it's also science, that we don't look at nature so much anymore.
Mm-hmm. And that's something too, just to bring it back to yoga, is like when you're thinking about your yoga practice and bringing everything back to inside, going back to more of the nature part of yourself, the nature part of your, I'm going to say like your, the energy and trying to balance these different energies that we have. It's not just happening on the inside. Like, what do we say in yoga? Like, what's on the inside is what's on the outside, right? So like
below, right? Inside out, but it's always connected.
Yes. Always connected, so it's always connected. And so
and also as yoga teaches, you also say it very often, and I do too. It's like observe how you're feeling today. How is your body doing today? How's your mind? How are your emotions? And everything is like flowing. You know, sometimes one part is very active. Some part is very slow. Sometimes you're balanced, like the gunas. Maybe you want to explain the gunas. So we feel like the movement of the planets, we feel it in our body, and in the yoga practice, you know, we really pay attention to that.
Yes. So the gunas, and you'll talk a bit more if you don't mind, just really like about when the planets are moving and that energy force of how that's like how, okay, so everything around us, everything is looking for balance. Everything is like searching for that place of balance. In yoga philosophy, we talk about the gunas, and we say that this is like the like the primal nature, like the force of the universe. And when energy is very rajasic, we call this rajas, you know, it's very fiery, it's very sun energy, it's very like upward movement. It's great. We need this rajasic energy in the world to move forward, to get things to like to burn, to like to clear paths, to do things, you know. But when we're in that rajasic energy over and over and over and over and over again, we get, to lack of better words here, but like burnt out, right? You feel like the sense of like manic. So the opposite energy, which is everywhere and in everything, is tamas. And tamasic energy is quite still, and it's grounding, and it's hibernating, and it's drawing in. You know, we'll talk about the seasons too, but it's like drawing in. It's kind of like more of hibernation time. And tamasic energy is fantastic. Well, you need that from time to time, but if you're only in that energy, you're like down and depressed, and like it's too hard.
Get anything done,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you can't get anything done, right? So what are we looking for in the theory of the gunas? We're all looking for this sattva energy, this sattvic energy of where things are like balance each other out, where this tamas and rajas are both like, you know, you can like a little bit down, a little bit up, a little bit here, a little bit there, but you got this playing field of where the energies are just flowing with one another. You're not too low, you're not too high, you know. And something about the planets, depending on where they are, they're also using that, like that field of energy is like moving us from the place of like high energy to low energy. And it's also looking for this place of, all right, when are things going to mellow out? Yeah. I'm going to laugh because we all know whenever you hear Mercury retrograde, people go crazy about it. Yeah, it's like what people think about astrology, but you know, so
I think we'll go into the retrograde, which is really interesting, maybe a little bit later, because it's actually an optical illusion. But because we are here on Earth, you know, we perceive it as this, and therefore it has an effect on us. But like with those energies, what is also interesting, you know, in astrology, we say there's something like an applying aspect and a separating aspect. So let's say you're a beginning Gemini, yes, and Saturn in Western is right now in Pisces. So he's around 6 degrees right now, and your sun is around 5. So it had been applying for a while. You felt it a lot. He passed you. Now he's going retrograde again. So each time when he comes close, it's an applying energy. So it's like more rajasic. There's like stuff going on. Once he has passed, you know, things are coming down. So when we have like, you know, we had a Saturn Mars opposition just a few hours ago. Once it was applying, everybody's feeling it. And then there's this thing like where they are both really opposite. That's the highlight. Like there could be an explosion, or you feel it restricted or angry. And then once it's separating, it's releasing again. So that's how those energies also play out, like the gunas, like, you know, active and then letting go, and then there's more balance. And also interesting, you know, that when you have a lot of good aspects, like easy angles, people tend to be a little bit more tamasic, like because a lot of luck comes to them. And when people have a lot of difficult aspects with planets in the chart, there's a lot of drive and a wish to overcome those difficulties. So yeah, sometimes it's not so bad to have like a little bit of challenge in life to get going, you know.
same thing in a yoga class, right? Imagine if we just went to a yoga class and every time we're in a pose, It's just a pose that we know, and our body easily goes into it, and everything is smooth sailing. It's when you're in the moment of a yoga pose where you are like, your brain, your mind, your ego comes up, and it's just like, oh, I can't do this. Oh, this is so hard. Oh, I'll never be able to do this. Oh, I shouldn't even be in this yoga class. And then you catch these thoughts and you catch that energy. And then you say, wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to have to practice being present. And this is when my yoga practice begins, of when I'm trying to ease my mind in the easy seat of a yoga pose.
And you also start to understand, like, there is my favorite pose, but maybe the pose I like least is the one I need most. Like today in class, there was a girl, she was like, I hate yin yoga. I was like, really, you do? It's so horrible. It's so painful. The stretching, I have to be so long in there. And the first thing I thought is like, well, probably you need it the most. Maybe you have so much active, Rajasic energy that for you to move and be fast, you probably have a lot of Mars in you, like you like working out and working hard, but like, where is the sense of calming down? And like with long holds, you really have to start controlling your mind. And then I think with that kind of yoga practice, it also moves a little bit already into meditation, watching your thoughts, as you said. And also meditation and all that, it's consciousness, and it goes back to yoga because it's all connected.
All connected. It is all connected. Oh, I love it. Okay, so I'm going to read the second question. I think we're going to keep the second question for another. Well, let's read this question. Do you find horoscopes or charts more helpful?
Yes, I think the person is like a little bit mixing up those terms. So I think, like, every horoscope has a chart, right? Like either a Western chart or a Vedic chart. So I need to somehow see how the planets are positioned and in what houses and what rulers do they have. But I think the person thinks when they say horoscopes like something in a magazine, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yes. So I worked for a newspaper for a year, and I know that sometimes horoscopes are written by interns, like people who are beginners, like just write a horoscope or write a story about kitties or dogs, whatever, because that's how they start to write, So sometimes those things are not true at all. And then at best, an astrologer writes those horoscopes, but of course, he or she can only talk about the sun and all the other planets in relation to the sun. And yeah, the sun is really important because it's not a planet, it's actually the star we are revolving around. But it can only show like one aspect of your life, So now Saturn moving towards your sun is in your 9th house. So you're a spiritual teacher, it has an effect. So we're starting this right now, and Saturn is always like the next step and getting serious, getting to business. So yeah, it's triggering that, but you have so much more in your chart. So I think if you really want to know what's going on in all parts of your life, you always need a chart. So that means you have to have your birthday, the exact time, and the city you're born in, and then we can have a chart. In Vedic, we also can read from the moon. So sometimes if people don't know the exact time, there's a way to read it. But of course, the exact time makes it much more precise.
Now, can I ask a question? So with the exact time, so let's say, so I was born 2:10 p.m. in New York City. So, but what if I was really born, let's just say that the hospital didn't, write it down. Let's say if I was really born at 1:10 and then they put it down as 2:10. Will that make such a big difference in my chart, or will that just, I'm just, it's just a question, just asking,
So in exactly the example you gave, it wouldn't change your rising because you are a very late rising in Virgo. So the rising is usually within 2 hours, but like my rising is 29 of Leo. So if I was just born 4 or 5 minutes later, I would have a rising of Virgo. So all my houses would have different rulers and it would mean something else. So it really depends. Yeah, the most exact time is the best. Some astrologers do rectification, like then you need like 10 major events in your life and you can calculate it back. It's a lot of work. It's very difficult. So I mean, if you have the time, it's best. And if babies are born in the near future, I always say, please, look at the watch. It should be really exact.
Yeah. And yes. And whenever whenever the student asks about like horoscope versus chart, when I first got into astrology, I was in college, living in the city, going to college in Manhattan, and I picked up the Village Voice. It was a free paper, and this astrologer named Rob Brenzi would write his free will astrology column. Without knowing and understanding about astrology, I had to get that paper. I had to cut out my Gemini and I would put it on my mirror in my room because it gave me, in a sense, hope of understanding myself. Like it gave me this place of like, okay, I'm feeling this. I'm not alone. Because, the way that he would write certain things, it would just be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's happening in my life. And I would just, so it's not that my life followed the reading. Instead, my life, then I was able to say, this is how I'm feeling. And maybe it's all like, not maybe, but it's all okay. Like this is all part of a bigger energy out there that perhaps I don't understand. But it's very comforting for me to know that there are higher powers. This is why I'm on my spiritual path, and I'm happy to be here. So if
What I also think is interesting as for this, and it's with astrology and yoga, like you really need to experience it. Like, I started with yoga in 2010. I was on a TV show and I was very exhausted. And my boyfriend at that time said, you need to find something to relax because you cannot always just sleep or nap, all the time. So I started yoga and I felt the effect. I was like, oh my God, all of a sudden I can sleep and my body feels better. I mean, I was a dancer, I always moved, but it was like different movement and it helped with some issues from dancing. And the same with astrology. So I met this astrologer in 2002 and she told me in 2003, you will move to Germany. And I was like, I'm never going to move to Germany. I like America. If I would move to America or maybe Italy. In September of 2003, I was sitting in Berlin. I got a job there on a TV show and I almost lived there for 3 years. So it's like the experience, like you go to yoga, you find it, you stay there because it makes you feel good. And you find astrology, oh my God, it really has an effect. Like, how does it go back and forward? There are really like waves and circles, how nature moves, and like everything is, going up and down. Once your life is really difficult, then it gets easier, like Saturn repeats every 7 years. So there's like a rhythm to life, and you need to experience really both of them.
Yes. And to your point, like you said something like, it's like, you have to realize this for yourself, right? So like faith is something where you realize for yourself. Everyone can tell you to have faith. Everyone can tell you that, this is what's happening. And if you don't have that, if you don't jump into it for yourself and then come up with your own, I'm going to use the word again, realizations about it. You can drag someone to a yoga class, but when they're not ready, like for yoga, for me, when I first started, my mom actually did yoga my entire life. And she always tried to get me into yoga. And I was like, no way, I'm not doing this yoga stuff. And then she brought me to a yoga class and everyone was oming and incense. And I thought, what are these people doing? They're like, what is this? And then the second time I went to a yoga class, my sister brought me to a Bikram studio. I was in my mid-20s and I was disgusted. It stunk. It was like carpet. It was so gross. I was like, no way. When I was ready to get into yoga, it was kind of like the story that you have, like you're so stressed out and you just like needed this like sense of release. But when I found yoga, it helped me in so many, it changed my whole life, because it not only helped me, but it put me on more of an internal journey path where no one can tell me to do yoga. I had to be ready to do yoga. And when I was ready to walk that path and to realize what this practice can do for me, then it was, then my, I mean, this is where I'm at now. So, you know,
As they're both, spiritual, I think like when life is really smooth, we don't go to yoga, we don't stretch, we don't work on the body and all of that. And when life is really good, why should you ask an astrologer what is going on? So the spiritual path, unfortunately for most of us, unless you're really aware already, starts with the dark night of the soul, or a lot of chaos and difficulty. Once you need to find a solution, when you're ready for it, a teacher will appear, and then you are ready to hear it. And also, like with the chart, it's like with yoga, it's like a development. First, I just want to feel better in my physical body, and then they said, well, at some point you'll be interested in the yoga philosophy. I was like, no, I don't like the chanting, all of this. Then at some point I was like, I really do want to meditate. And I started with the mala, with the japas, and then real meditation, and what is behind all of this. And with astrology, it's also like you experience like, oh, this had an effect on me. And then I look into the chart, all of a sudden I understand myself better. I have like always problems in this area of my life, and it's in the chart, and it tells me where it's coming from and what I need to work on.
yeah. I got my first chart read by a Vedic astrologer back, I believe it was in 2016.
Yeah.
And she told me that in 2017, in the fall of 2017, I was going to lose my best friend. And I wrapped my head around it. Like, who am I going to lose? Like, I went through all my like really good friends in my life in my head, and then I let it go. Like I didn't, it's like, but she gave me great tips and tools on what I could be working on in my life, especially with Saturn wrecking a lot of chaos into my life, or not even chaos, just Saturn doing what Saturn does, right? It slows everything down, and it just made me, it's like watching paint dry. It's like I had to just, what was I going to do with my hands? What was I going to do with my time? How was I going to build myself and grow myself? And I'm definitely in it, just like it was in that time in this growth mode. But anyway, when 2017 rolled around, and after I lost my best friend, and I went through my notes just one day randomly and read through our session, I was floored. I was like, how did she know? My best friend actually ended up to be my husband, which I had no idea that I was going to get divorced. I did on a subconscious level, on an unconscious level, but not consciously. So when it all came up, and then when she was able to see that in my chart around the exact time. So Natalie, maybe you can like talk about this a little bit for us, like, for anyone out there that feels like, well, astrology is just like very broad, or you're just like, I'm now going to sound like the naysayer, right? Or like, what? Well, it's just like you're making things up, or blah, blah, blah. What would you say to that? I mean, I would, but what would you say about that?
You should really go out there and find an astrologer who's really good, who understands it. If you really want to go deep into like family patterns and all of that, maybe even go to a Vedic. I mean, in Western, we do a lot of psychological stuff too, but there is so much in there. And I mean, I finished my Vedic studies in April, and I'm doing the Vedic now too. And in the last few readings, Kate, for me, it's always, I don't know these people. I don't know anything about their lives. And I'm looking in there and I'm like, your dad has a chronic disease. And she's like, yes, he's been on dialysis for a long time. And then I'm like, I don't know, this lady, she was breeding dogs. I was like, I don't understand it, but you're going to be teaching a lot next year. I don't know how you can do it. Like, yes, I mean, I want to transition from breeding puppies to teaching people how to breed puppies. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Because one girl, she was like, well, I have a problem. I was like, it's probably with your bones, right? And she's like, yes. So, I mean, there is so much in there. It's just incredible. So, just, as we said, you really need to try it out. And I had, like, when I started on my astrology path, it's an omen. Joni Patry, one of my teachers, she said, when there's an omen in nature, you always have to pay attention. So we have a thunderstorm coming up here. So God is listening to us. My prediction, as I said, with, moving to Berlin, to Germany, like, you have to experience it once and then see if it's true, like, get a reading, try it out.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So to just tie up this question really quick, what's more helpful, to read the daily horoscopes or to get your chart, read? Get your chart read, because your daily horoscope is going to talk to every Gemini. Natalie and I both, right? So we're both Gemini. So you're going to talk to both of us. And yet our charts might look similar in certain places, but they're very different. And our journeys are very different. So get your chart read. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see another question.
And actually, Kate, you do see the interest in yoga or in astrology in the chart. So if I'm allowed to share,
Yes.
the ruler of your chart, which is always the planet that rules the rising, goes to your 8th house of metaphysical stuff. And your sun, your personality is in the 9th house of teaching. So, I mean, it's in the chart. You're interested in that. So it is.
And that's the part that, we're strongly saying to get your chart read here, because when you read my chart, it is a blueprint in a sense of my life. And I always get my chart, Natalie, what you said before, it makes me laugh, because we don't seek out to get our charts read when things are going fantastic. Because when things are going fantastic, you're just flowing in your life and things are happening and you're like, woohoo, this is great. Well, we get our charts read when we are at the lowest part and just thinking, because we're on a cycle, right? So we're on the low part of the cycle and not knowing when that is going to end. And we're thinking to ourselves, how do we pull, what is going to happen? And then when you get your chart read and you understand, oh, this might, this frequency or this energy or this, whatever you want to call it, is going to take place for the next, I don't know, 6 months. To be honest, that helps you. That helps you, because then you can say, okay, I only have to deal with this energy for the next 6 months. Okay, I at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly, and that's what my teacher Joni Patry said, like, give your clients, like, the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, Saturn will be there for 1 year, then it's over. And I think let's tie it back to yoga. Like, when you're in a very challenging pose and the mind starts talking like, I cannot hold this anymore, it's too much for me. One of my teachers always said, like, once you reach this point, you can hold it for so much longer. It's just the mind kicking in. And then you realize, okay, I'm not the mind. It's just a tape that is running and I can still breathe. And then it's, it's like building stamina, like with Saturn, like, how long can I stay in there and still breathe? And okay, it's going on in my head, but I'm not listening to what he's saying, in my mind and all that. So, like, there's a certain kind of patience, but I know it's just for a few weeks or a few months, and then it's over. And like with Pluto, like when Pluto is hitting a point in your chart, it's the worst time in your life. Pluto is life and death. He's changing everything, like, for 1.5 years. But later on, you look back, it was the greatest gift in your life, because he removed everything that was not supposed to be there anymore, and you're changed forever. So it's like the growing pains, right? Like in the yoga pose, you're getting strong and you're training your mind to not, like, take over.
Yes.
And astrology, it's too, like, building stamina for life.
There's a saying that I share in my yoga classes. It's, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is sit in the fire and wait for the blessings. It's just being able to, it doesn't make it easy. Doesn't make it like, oh, my challenge is going to go away. Oh, this issue is going to go away. It doesn't do that, but in a sense, it teaches us how to just be present in whatever it is that's happening in our life, because you can fight it, and you could also learn how to sit in the fire and wait for your blessings.
And therefore, this is like one of the greatest things yoga has been teaching us, for our life, like really how to get through difficult situations. And, some people just do it as a physical practice, but, something is sticking there, they also take this with them, like when things are difficult. So yeah, and also like, even like, sorry, even like, sometimes like it's noisy outside, or they're building something, there's this construction, and like even when you do meditation or just a yoga class, and then I'm like, be grateful, because everybody can have a nice and easy yoga class when it's quiet, but hey, if you have a challenge there, can you still focus, and can you still breathe, and can you still move and take something out of it? So, and that's all what life is about. It's never all easy.
No, and it's in the challenges that actually form us as we grow and as we step into our, I'm going to use the word evolved, even though that word to some people it sounds a little scary, because they're like, feel like, oh, but we're evolving every day. Like we're shifting every day, just like these planets are. Even if they shift, some of them move fast, some of them move slow, some of them, are some of them, but they're moving. They're not. Does anything stay still? The sun?
So there is actually like it goes to the topic of retrograde motion. So right now, Venus is standing still, because on Saturday for America and Sunday for Europe, it will actually start moving retrograde. So there is a time where it looks as an optical illusion, like she's standing still. And it's really interesting, like planets are like seeming to stand still when they're closest to Earth. And when you look into a chart, actually, they are the strongest. Like, for instance, I think you have a standing still Pluto. So this is like one of your strongest planets then in the chart, because like he's not moving, he's closest to Earth. So that's a very important thing actually to look at when planets are stationary. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But just for time, of course they're moving. It just looks for us, from our perspective,
Sure. But that's another thing too, which is like, just to bring this topic back real quick, and I'll tie that up with a little bow, is to remember that everything is constantly changing. Everything is constantly changing. So, that's one of the major lessons also in our yoga practice, that the only thing constant in life is actually change. And what a lot of people can't, I don't know if the word can't is a good word, but struggle with, is the fact that everything is changing. It's great if it's changing when you're like, everything is down, everything is bad. You want it to change, but it's also understanding that, everything is changing. And when we go into yoga, and you go into like the limbs of yoga, non-attachment, and the way that you want to move in your life, so that way you are living in the present moment, is because it helps you to deal, yogis celebrate change. But change comes with a lot of pain too, change is not easy. And yet, if we don't know how to roll with change, we're going to feel the pain anyway. So we might as well learn how to roll with it. And yeah, so
I want to give you one short last story about change. So in astrology, the planet of change is Uranus. The planet of sudden change. So I was sitting on my plane next to a lady, and she has a degree in Taurus. She was telling me she's Taurus. Oh, what day are you born? That day. I was like calculating. I was like, planet Uranus hit your sun last year. So it's raining now. So Uranus takes like 83 years to pass the entire zodiac. So, I mean, he's probably just passing a spot once in your life, So I was like, you must have had a huge life change last year. And she was like, no, I didn't. I was like, wow, interesting. So we were sitting like for 10 hours next to each other. So a few hours later, we get our meal, and she's like, I lost 40 pounds last year. I was like, and you didn't have a major life change? I was like, with change, you never know from which corner it's coming, like you think, oh, change is like losing a relationship or a job. No, it can be just losing a few pounds, so
yeah. Totally. Natalie, let's answer one more question, okay? The study is so overwhelming, which in both yoga and astrology, okay? The study, when you practice yoga, when you go in for your very first certification, it's a 200-hour teacher training. They say it's like, just learning, like imagine just taking a little thimble, a little spoon and just picking up a little bit of the ocean. And that's all you're like, but there's so much more knowledge to learn. And the same thing with astrology, it's, so the question is like, where to begin? Where do we begin?
So I mean, you have to, like always, start with the basics. So in astrology, it's like, what planets are there? What do they represent? So we talked a lot about Mars today, but Mars is not just action or aggression. Like in Vedic astrology, for instance, he's the Karaka indicator of siblings or real estate, So you should know all the meanings of the planets, the meanings of the houses, then the aspects, what angles do they form. That's already the beginning. And, maybe started with Western astrology because it's a little bit easier to read the chart. And then just go step by step, and even for me, I mean, I'm reading books of my teachers now, and there's still so much more knowledge. I'm always learning. There's always an astrologer who knows a little bit more, and it's diving deep. And with yoga, it's also step by step, because if you do not only practice physical yoga, but go to the sutras cave, right? There's so much information there, and it's written in such a condensed way to understand. Like even one sutra, you can spend weeks and months on, or even a lifetime, on trying to understand like the deeper meaning of yoga and what it does to the body and the mind. And I mean, like the pada 3 in the sutras, it's all about those great extra talents and things that people can do with their bodies and whatever, like once they've mastered certain levels. I mean, it's just never ending, but start step by step. Start with the planets and houses and
yeah and
or learn it online, whatever you want.
Right. But it's like, I guess, something I would love to add is like, if it does feel overwhelming, just like yoga can feel overwhelming. I have students who are very interested in becoming yoga teachers, and it's because they want to pass down this energy of how good they feel. So they want to then share that. And when they go into the journey of becoming a yoga teacher, it's like you get all this stuff. It's like, I'll never be able to teach. I'll never be able to do this. It's like, well, you just have to take the first step. So you just have to remember that whatever it is that you're doing and you're stepping into, like there is this, yogis believe that no matter where you are on your growth and your spiritual path, when you pass away, okay, if you believe in reincarnation, then when you come back into this world, if you come back, if you haven't like evolved yourself and you reach enlightenment, but if you come back, you'll come back into a family that would allow you to continue your studies. So I always remind this to all of the teachers that I'm training, is because sometimes we feel that the next person knows more, or this person knows more. So I'm far behind. It's like, no one's behind. You're exactly where you're meant to be. And it's like, so not the word surrender, but just, and maybe the word is more of acceptance. It's like, just enjoy where you're at, because everything around you is going to open if you just enjoy your journey. So just take those steps forward. And whether it's in your yoga practice of learning more about yoga, whether it's in astrology and learning more about the planets, if this is exciting to someone, if this is exciting to you, then be in it. And the teachers will come, the videos will come, the excitement will come.
And also maybe one more thing to it, like I'm reading this book from James Graham, a great astrologer, and he also says, even as an astrologer, you can admit, like, I just really don't know what this part in your chart means. Like, and even as a yoga teacher, when you start out on your journey teaching, of course, you don't have so much background like somebody who's been teaching for 10, 15, 20 years, but you share whatever knowledge you have right now. And if a question comes up, well, maybe I don't know, or I'm going to tell you in the next class. It's just all about being authentic, and you just share from whatever point you're at the moment. So
Absolutely. And like in my newsletters for Soul and Steady, you know, I write about what's happening like astrologically, but really like what I kind of stick to because it's still that baby. And I'm not talking bad about it. I'm just like I'm in my growth process of like learning, you know, when I talk about like more of like the cycles of the moon and understanding where the moon fits, like let's say if the moon's in Cancer or what, you know, what is happening. And I talk a bit more about that and in questions of that are inspiring people to ask the internal questions to help them to grow. So it doesn't have to look like what other people are doing too. It doesn't have to look like, oh, I'm going to read your chart now. It can look like, hey, I know a bit about Saturn because Saturn has been in my life for a while and I know a lot about Saturn. So I can talk about Saturn in a way that's passionate because I've read about Saturn and I study Saturn. So you know, and it's like, so that's something too to remember is that like, you know, it's you don't feel like just wherever you're at, like you share whatever it is that you have, because in tomorrow you're going to be different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like also in class, I'm like, I know some people don't like astrology when I'm teaching yoga, and some people do. So I'm very careful of what I do share, but then I'm always like, I'm authentic. That's me, and I know that stuff. So I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it softly. So when they're in shavasana and they're coming out, I'm like, let's do some nadi shodhana to balance you. So energies right now are really intense. Maybe you do feel it or not. So for the weekend, if you feel something coming up, like maybe do some rounds of nadi shodhana to ground yourself more. And I leave it at this, and then, if people are really interested, they follow me to the changing room. They're like, what's going on? I do feel it. And then I can explain it a little bit more. And people are not interested, they didn't even hear it, So you just offer a tiny bit. And you have this great saying, which I love so much from your yoga classes and the way you taught your teacher trainings. It's like, you hide the spinach in the pasta, right? Like you hide some philosophy or teaching or whatever knowledge you have in something that tastes good and easy, and
Yep, it's exactly that. Like what I always say, the spinach and the pasta is the same exact thing, but I always say you put the broccoli in the French fry, right?
Right.
So, but it's the same thing. It's like you put the broccoli in the French fry because, when I came to yoga, the teacher that actually opened me up for the spiritual side of the practice, she would come in and she would have some articles just photocopied from Yoga Journal and just have it by the door. And, and when I picked up these articles and then I'm waiting on the train to go back to my apartment and I'm like reading this article, like, what is this?
Yes.
This is yoga. I had no idea. I thought yoga was warrior one. I didn't realize that yoga is this whole system, this whole beautiful philosophy and way of life. So I was like, holy cow. So that's going to be the lesson. So, don't dim your light. Don't feel like you need to, deliver to, don't dim your light because people need the light.
So I think that's a wonderful finishing line. Astrology is the science of light. And, in yoga, we're also authentic. We share our light, we live our light. And yeah, I think that's a wonderful last sentence for our first episode. What do you think, Kate?
I think so. So thank you everyone for tuning in and listening, and stay tuned for our next episode of Astro Yoga Chat. Thank you.
Well, bye everyone.
Bye.